All right, today we're diving into Kim Crawley's 8 Steps to Better Security. And here's the deal. This is not just for the tech folks. We're going to focus on the one big thing that most businesses, maybe even yours, get totally wrong about cybersecurity. So let's jump right in. Right off the bat, the whole point of this guide is to flip the script. It says that cybersecurity isn't just about firewalls and complex code. No, it's way deeper than that. It's all tangled up in how we behave, our company culture, psychology, even sociology. So to answer that, we've got to talk about one of the most infamous hackers in history, Kevin Mitnick. But here's the twist. His real superpower wasn't his technical skill. It was the fact that he was, at his core, an incredible con man. Mitnick was a master of what we call social engineering. I mean, he basically took classic, old-school con artist tricks and just updated them for the modern world, using things like a phone or an email to trick people into handing over the keys to the kingdom. And this is where it all clicks. Get this. Some studies show that up to 95% of all cyber attacks today have some kind of social engineering involved. That is a staggering number. It means the real vulnerability isn't just a server, it's the person sitting at the keyboard. And that fundamental truth, that security is really all about people, is exactly what the first 2 steps of this guide are focused on. It's about building your defenses around the human element first, not as an afterthought. Step 1, you have to build a strong security culture. And listen, this isn't just some nice-to-have HR initiative. It is the absolute bedrock that everything else is built on. Without it, nothing else works. It has to include everyone, and it has to start with empathy for the people you're trying to protect. Now, you can't have a great culture without a great team, which leads us right into step 2. But to build that team, we first have to bust this really harmful myth about a cybersecurity skills gap. The argument here is that the problem isn't a lack of talented people. The real problem is organizations shooting themselves in the foot with crazy job requirements and then underpaying the experts they finally manage to hire. And, hiring and keeping those great people, well, that takes a real budget. For a typical company, we're talking about 3 to 5% of the total IT spend going to security. But if you're in an industry like finance or healthcare, where data is your lifeblood, that number really needs to be more like 10 to 15%. Okay, so you've got the culture, you've got the team. Now, what do they actually do? You need a playbook. This next section gets into the nitty-gritty, the rules, the tests, and the plans that make up your day-to-day defense. Step 3 is all about regulatory compliance. Things like GDPR in Europe or HIPAA for health data. These are totally non-negotiable. But here's the key idea, and I love this phrase. Compliance is the floor, not the ceiling. It's the absolute bare minimum you should be doing. And if you're wondering why you need to aim higher, well, just look at this number. A study by IBM in 2020 found the average cost of a data breach in the US was over $8.6 million. And that doesn't even count the regulatory fines, the lawsuits, or the damage to your reputation. So how do you go beyond that minimum? That brings us to step 4, actually testing your defenses to find the weak spots before the bad guys do. There are 2 main ways to do this. A vulnerability assessment is like a broad checkup, looking for any known issues. A penetration test, or pen test, is way more intense. It's like a stress test, where you hire experts to actively try and break in. But look, no defense is ever going to be perfect. Something will eventually get through. That's what step 5 is for, your incident response plan. It's this continuous 6-stage cycle. You prepare, you detect an attack, you contain the damage, you get rid of the threat, and then, this is the most important part, you analyze what happened so you can get better. Then you're right back to preparation, but smarter this time. So this whole playbook, it exists for one reason, to protect your stuff. Step 6 is all about having a deep understanding of what your digital assets are and how to control them, whether they're sitting in the cloud, on a server, or on your employees' phones. Now, protecting those assets really boils down to 3 core principles, famously known as the CIA triad. Think of it like a bank vault. Confidentiality means only the right people can look inside. Integrity means no one can secretly change what's in there. And availability means you can actually get to your stuff when you need it. Every single cyber attack is trying to break at least one of these 3 things. And once you get that triad, modern threats suddenly make a lot more sense. Take ransomware. The reason it's so devastating is that it's a triple whammy. It attacks availability by locking your files, it threatens confidentiality by saying it'll leak them, and it completely destroys the integrity of your systems. And that is precisely why this guide is so blunt about ransomware. Your single most powerful weapon is not some fancy tool. It's having good, secure backups that you have actually tested and know you can restore from. That is what keeps you from having to pay a criminal. That whole idea of recovery, of being able to bounce back, that's the core of our final section. The last couple of steps are all about building resilience right into the DNA of your organization. Which brings us to step 7, and a really important distinction. Business continuity is the big picture plan for keeping the lights on during any kind of major disruption. A cyber attack, a hurricane, a power outage, you name it. Disaster recovery is just one piece of that bigger plan, specifically focused on getting back up and running after a physical event like a fire or a flood. And finally, for step 8, we come full circle, right back to where we started, the human factor. Because we can't forget that threats aren't only on the outside. Insider threats, whether it's a malicious employee or just someone who made an honest mistake, are incredibly common and often much, much harder to detect. At the end of the day, the honest truth is that nobody is immune. Even cybersecurity experts can be tricked by a really sophisticated social engineering attack. And because of that, building a resilient system and, even more importantly, a resilient culture is your only real defense in the long run. So, if you take one thing away from all this, let it be this. Security isn't a product you can just buy and install. It's a living process. The guide puts it perfectly. It's like tending a houseplant. It needs constant care and attention to stay healthy. And that leaves us with one final big question to chew on. We've seen how critical the human factor is. So, as AI gets better and better at creating convincing deepfakes and hyper-personalized scams, how is that human factor going to change? How will we need to adapt our defenses for a world where it's getting harder and harder to tell what's real? Definitely something to think about.